Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, my name is Sharon and I'm a trainee clinical psychologist, and in today's video we're going to try to do a one take, hopefully wonder, we'll see how it goes. I have an hour to film, edit and upload this video, otherwise I'm never going to get it done. But today's video is going to be looking through my Declin Psy interview prep folder, and yes, it looks like a hefty one, so I'm going to put this disclaimer out there like right now that there is a lot of stuff in here, but you don't need to go through all of the stuff that I went through. This was just a way for me to manage my anxieties around the interview season. Whether that's helpful or not helpful for you, that's kind of a decision that you have to make. I think there are some helpful resources and some ideas to help you to reflect. Also, if you can hear rustling about, bells, scratching, I'm currently looking after my mum's kitten and it's very loud, and also Milo and him play a lot, so I do apologise, but we're going very, old school. OG viewers, you will know where I am. A little throwback for us all. But yeah, with all that being said, let's get into the video. So the first thing that I've got in my folder is a kind of a template for Cbt formulation and also narrative formulation. Are you really going to meow for this whole thing? So I've got a sheet here which summarises Cbt formulation and also narrative formulation. And these are the two bits of formulation that I'm comfortable with. This will depend on formulation that you are comfortable with if you want to do something like this. But I basically have broken it down into kind of the structure for formulation, the theory that underpins the formulation, and then an intervention or various interventions that could be used. And I think it's really good to go through formulation before the interview, as you're going to be talking about clinical cases, so obviously relate this formulation page to ones that you've used in the past. And also if there are any clinical questions related to formulation, it's always good to review it, and also those theory practice links. I've then kind of gone into more depth, so that's more like my cheat sheet. I then go into kind of in depth like narrative formulation and Cbt formulation, where I've really written it out, drawn some diagrams out to kind of just consolidate the information. Okay, and then we go on to the Nhs Constitution. So the reason why I went through the Nhs Constitution, and I believe I went through the summary version, and it's just because it gives you a good idea of what the NHS is, kind of the principles that guide the NHS, and kind of the rights and pledges that they make for the people that we serve. While I didn't use this document to answer a specific question, I think it's really good to remember who you're going to be working for and kind of the values that underpin the NHS as an employer. I think, again, this is one of the pieces of prep that I did mainly to manage my own anxieties rather than it being essential. I basically just made notes on it and some reflections and thought about how it kind of impacted my work as an assistant and how it probably will impact my work as a trainee clinical psychologist. I then went through the Nhs Long-Term Plan. I think this is so important. The Nhs Long-Term Plan is basically a 5-year forward plan, but also there's a 10-year plan. So they talk about the funding, how they're going to use the funding, and kind of the practical things that they're going to do to deliver it. And so once I kind of made my... I'm sorry guys, it's a show with all of the animals today. So with the Nhs Long-Term Plan, I made notes, and then I also kind of reflected on that plan. And so I thought about the long-term plan in the context of psychology. So I kind of thought about, how this increased funding will impact clinical psychology. I mean, we're already seeing it. We're seeing such an increase in clinical psychology doctoral places, which is so good. But then also thinking about this idea of the right care, and I personally have a interest in learning disability services, and so I was kind of reflecting on those points. So actually the long-term plan is separate from the 5-year forward plan. So then I looked into the 5-year forward plan, did the same thing, kind of wrote some notes, and then also had a page on my reflections. And so it's just kind of, I learn best and I reflect best when I write things down. I've then got a page on various theories that I could bring into the interview should I need them. I mean, go through your undergraduate theories. I'm not going to read them out just because I think that might be kind of guiding too much, and I do need to be careful. But think about your undergraduate theories, especially ones that could be used quite easily between cases, just in case you need them. Again, I think a big part of this interview is the ability to be flexible in your answers and in the prep that you've done, because the chances are that the prep that you do isn't going to directly relate to all of the questions. So just be ready with theories that can go across various domains. So it could be, stages of change or attachment. Like those two theories are really kind of, can can be brought into loads of different situations. And so I just kind of like wrote down the reference and then also a couple of pointers and then how I've used those theories in my past work. So I chose about 3 theories there. And then I looked at different models. So one model that I've got here is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then I've written notes about that model, and then I've written the initials of clients that I've worked with where this model has been brought in, and that way I can talk about it in the interview. So I'm making those theory practice links when I'm answering the questions. I've also down here on this part of this model section, which probably shouldn't really go here, I don't think, but I've also reflected on the social graces. This will depend on the courses that you're applying to, but I was going for more kind of, you know, reflective courses, and so it was important for me to reflect on my identity and the identity of people I work with. So reflect on social graces if you think that's appropriate. And now this next section is more to do with kind of research, and so for every interview that I've done, I've always prepared an article, as in I've read an article and kind of reflected on it. So here I've chosen 2 different articles, both recent. So the first one is from 2017, the other one is 2019, and I've again broken it down into that APFCC format that I like to use. So that's aim, procedures, findings, conclusions and critique. And then more importantly, I've linked it to the wider context in clinical psychology and how it impacts clinical practice. And more specifically, it should be research that you read in relation to your work to, I guess, maybe showcase that you can use research in a practical way. So again, a tip for when you're choosing articles, choose ones that can be used quite broadly. So I chose one on CBT and then another one on group work. Bringing different bits of research in is quite important, and you just want to be prepared. Again, the reason why there is so much in this folder is to manage my own anxieties, and if this feels like too much, it probably is too much. And if I wasn't so anxious about my interview, and if this wasn't my way of coping, then I wouldn't have done all this prep. But you can pick and choose from this what you will. Okay, this folder is not as organised as I thought, because then we go into the 9 competencies of clinical psychologists. I guess, yeah, I've gone through all of them, written notes, and I've thought about kind of where I was at with each of those different competencies. So whether there were some key areas for development for me, which there definitely is and was. And again, with all of these documents, I wasn't just like reading them and taking notes. I was taking time to actually reflect on them, and I think that's what's key, is that before your interview you are reflecting on all of your experiences. So I think having all of these documents as a basis for reflection was quite helpful for me, and each document kind of acted as its own reflective activity. And then I've got copies of the articles that I was kind of like reviewing in preparation. Again, I've got another article with the similar approach where I've APFCC'd it and then thought about relating it to a wider context. And then I've got a page on the values of the trust that my course is based in. So I go to the University of Essex, which means that I work in EPUT, and so I reflected on the EPUT trust values. They are open, compassionate and empowering. And so for each of them, I broke them down into the what, so what, now what model. So I reflected on each of those points and thought, okay, how have I shown open in my work? What is an example of that? How have I shown compassion in my work, and what have I learned from that? So again, I wasn't asked any questions directly related to that, but I think it was really helpful in just having those reflections, in just knowing that I have different situations for different scenarios, which is the most helpful thing, so that when you're in the interview you're not scrambling around in your head for different scenarios when you've already kind of written them down. And also a really important thing for me to mention here is that I didn't memorize this whole folder. Like, this was just me writing it down and me preparing. So I read through it quite a bit prior to my interview, and it really like grounded me, actually, just having this folder and knowing that, you know, I've written loads of stuff down, I can just read through it, and it really held me. I don't know why, it just contained me so much. But yeah, I didn't memorize any of this. I may memorize like the loose structure, I memorized the modules and the theories and reviewed them properly, but yeah, there's a lot of writing in here, and I just want to make sure that no one thinks that I like memorize this whole thing, because that would be a lot and it wouldn't be helpful at all. I also went through the Reforming the Mental Health Act, because it's something that we should be like aware of as clinicians. Again, I wasn't asked anything directly about this, but part of the interview is kind of knowing what is going on in the world of psychology, what are the current affairs essentially. And so I guess in 2017 is when the Mental Health Act was reviewed, which I guess isn't that recent anymore, but I think at the time it felt quite recent, and I think for my work it felt quite relevant. And so again, I made notes on the paper. There are loads of summaries as well of all of these NHS documents. Just find the summaries and then look through that, because the documents are so long themselves. So I made notes on it, and then I also had some time to reflect on my own experience and how I thought it would impact work as a clinical psychologist. I then kind of reflected on supervision and my experience of it, what I think it's for, how I use it in the best way, and a kind of an example where I've used it well and where it hasn't gone well. I also did something similar for MDT working. Now this is kind of more specific to, and then we go into kind of some more researchy bits where I have looked at the Casp Checklist. So the Casp Checklist is let me find it. It is the Critical Appraisal Skills Program. If I can, I will link stuff below, but I just don't know if I'm going to have time this time round, guys. I'm really, really sorry. If you just type in Critical Appraisal Skills Program, then it will come up. And basically, it is a checklist with different questions for you to critique research. And I guess it's helpful to bear in mind if you do have to read research in your interview and you just want some pointers in your mind of like, what should I be looking out for? What constitutes as a good piece of research? It really helps to get that critical thinking head on. I then went through the 6 C's, which is the 6 values for compassionate care. And similar to what I did with the trust values, I went through each of them and then I did the what, so what, now what, in relation to my own experience. So how have I shown care? What is an example of that in my work? And then what I learned from it. Same with competence, courage, commitment. Again, no questions were directly asked in relation to this. However, I did find this to be a really useful reflective exercise. And then I kind of went through the ClinSci forum and looked at that big list of interview questions that they have there. And they're just like, yeah, a really extensive list of questions. And I kind of just chose a few and wrote them out as if I was answering them. And again, this was just to contain my anxieties. Like, I guess one of the big questions which is good to reflect on is why clinical psychology and why not, you know, forensic psychology? Why not educational psychology? It's really helpful to reflect on that, and it also keeps you really motivated during this stressful process. So that's one of the things I reflected on. But there were some other questions that I did. Again, I didn't memorize any of these answers. I just had them in my mind. But I would say that I did kind of keep in mind the main points of why I want to be in clinical psychology. So I kind of chose 3 different words and I kept those in my mind rather than this whole kind of like spiel that I've got here. I then printed out my dissertation, my undergraduate dissertation, because I didn't know whether they would ask me about previous research that I've done. And so I broke it down to the same way that I always do with research, which is the APFCC format. And then again, I thought about how it related to clinical psychology. I then reflected on my own clinical skills and my strengths and weaknesses. So I kind of just did like strengths, weaknesses, and then listed all of my strengths and listed all of my weaknesses, and just kind of reflected on them. Again, just to keep them in my mind, like, what do I want to get out of training? Because the reason why I go into training is to become a better clinician. So it's really important to know what you're expecting from training and whether it's going to like fulfill the needs that you have. And then I've got here my cases that I brought in. So I actually only brought in 2 cases. I thought I brought in 3, but actually I only brought in 2. And so for this, I kind of made a table. I don't want to show anything. Everything is anonymized as well. But I made a table and it has the case and demographics, the reason for referral, how I formulated, so my formulation, a brief summary, models and theories, intervention that I used, extra comments about the case, what I learned, and kind of the issues that it raised. When I say issues that it raised, I'm more talking about, okay, what kind of question could this relate to? So for this one, I've put down a case that I found challenging, and then because of like my own identity, and then another case was where it went like just wrong, essentially, where everything kind of fell apart. And so I found that helpful to just refresh my mind. This is something that I read on the day of the interview, this brief summary, just to remind me of those pointers, because you know this stuff. These are cases that you have worked with, so you know them very well. But again, the nerves do get to the better of you, so it's important to do that. And then the rest is blank. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm wishing you all the best of luck in your interviews. You're going to smash it. Just try and control your nerves. If this helps you to manage your nerves, then do it. If it doesn't, then exit this video. I hope you already have. I hope you haven't sat through this video just feeling really worried. But the main thing is that you do not have to do all of this stuff. This is just what I did to contain my anxieties, and some of these things really did help me to reflect. You can look back at my old vlogs to see how I actually prepared alongside full-time work and all of the other life stuff that goes on. But yeah, I'm truly wishing you all the best of luck. You are going to smash it. If you're at interviews, you are amazing. Like, that is such a thing to celebrate, and make sure you reach out to people online, get that extra support, get those mock interviews in. That is kind of the main things that are going to help you. So I will be putting out more interview related videos. I am conscious that some places do have interviews very soon, and so I wanted to get this video out sooner rather than later. So I do hope you don't mind this kind of chaotic setup with all the noise and all of the things flying around and it being quite rushed. Please give this video a like if you did like it, and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. And until next time, guys, I will see you later. Bye.